to the 10 Washington Podcast.
Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Ted Wallison Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. And thank you so much to, of course, the man who makes it all happen financially. And that's Tom Mahalik from Tom's Place, an icon in the city of Toronto. If you're looking for great men's clothing at an unbelievable price, Tom's Place is the place to go. I mean, everything that he has in store is on sale before he puts it on sale. The savings are that good. The selection is it's unbelievable, truly. 2 floors, everything from formal attire to casual attire for all seasons. 190 Baldwin and Kensington Market is where you'll find them 7 days a week. Tom's Place, they'll suit you. Now, this week, and Paul Gatt, by the way, is our executive producer. Thanks to him for all the work that he puts in on this program. Now, this week, our special guest is known primarily as the host of the always fascinating radio program / podcast, Under the Influence. They're in their 20th season now. You can hear them on CBC Radio as well as Sirius XM, in Chicago on WBEZ, and in Kansas, KRPS. He is also the winner of literally hundreds of international advertising awards. He is a member of the Marketing Hall of Fame and a best-selling author. Yes, but his latest offering, in fact, his 6th, is titled Against the Grain, Defiant Giants Who Changed the World. Terry O'Reilly, it is good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Great to see you too, Ted. Great to be here.
Congratulations. Book number 6, again, as exciting and as compelling as all of your books prior to this. And I have to tell you, one thing that dawned on me as I was reading the book was, you know, I'm fascinated by all these stories that come up on Facebook about individuals and things that they've done, whether they be well-known individuals. Sometimes you see an actor's name come up and say, wow, I didn't realize that he had saved 150 sailors in a sinking submarine. And you read this and you think, wow, that's really incredible. And then somebody posts in the comments, AI, and I go, oh, God. It's not true, you know. And as I was reading your book, I'm thinking, I don't have to double-check this. I know this is factual. It is factual. Right. Because you're a research freak. And I am
a research freak. You're right. And you know what, Ted? We are living in a post-truth world right now. So you really have to triple check everything.
It is. Now, I got to ask you, do you get more comfort, entertainment, enjoyment out of writing a book or doing your radio program?
Ooh, there's a good question. I would say I prefer the radio show. I just love the whole notion of writing for radio and then producing it. So I do love that. The lovely thing about a book is I don't have a time limit.
Yeah.
So my show on CBC is 30 minutes, period. Here I don't have to worry about that. So I can do a deeper dig. Right.
As I mentioned in the intro, that you're not only here in Canada, but you're in Chicago and Kansas. When did you add Kansas to the mix?
Just this season. So they came on board this season.
So you're just plucking them city by city? Is that what you're doing?
In a very slow, methodical way. Yeah.
Okay, so you only have about a couple of thousand left to go, and then you cover the country. Yeah. 18 subjects in this book, all equally fascinating, to some more than others, for obvious reasons. You pay homage to these individuals, and I'm curious as to what was the decision-making process like? How did you decide on these 18, and were there more that were pushed to the side for now?
I think my criteria was basically this. I wanted to find people, first and foremost, that were bold enough to go up against conventional thinking, that swam upstream against all, theory to the opposite. So that was the main criteria. But I wanted even to dig deeper than that. I wanted to find people, and it's not everybody in this book, but it's most people in this book, who dared to risk it all. So by coming up with an idea in their respective profession or industry that they thought would revolutionize their industry, they were met with ridicule and humiliation, and some of them were fired, some of them were drummed out of their professions, yet at the end of the day, they were right.
Yeah.
That was the big criterion for most of the chapters in this book.
I've selected a handful here because obviously we don't have the time to go through
Yeah.
all of them, but I've selected a handful. I think it's a good mix, a good cross section. And I want to start with Taylor Swift because I think that was your most difficult chapter, as you write. It
Was.
was a continue. She's a continuing work in progress. There's constantly something going on in her life every day that astounds people, and I guess that's what you ran up against.
Well, people are kind of surprised that she's in this book, but I think she is the ultimate maverick
Yeah.
because, well, here's the funny thing about that chapter, Ted. I had to revise that chapter more than 20 times. Every time I thought I had finished it and moved it aside and moved on to another chapter, she would break another rule, break another norm, set another record. And I literally had to go back and keep revising it. And that said everything about Taylor Swift to me. Because if you think about her story, as everybody probably knows, she lost the rights to her master recordings through a typically bad record contract. So what does she do? She decides to re-record entire albums. Nobody does that. I mean, an artist may record a hit song, but nobody records full albums, right? And she does things like she invites her fans into her homes for listening parties. Nobody does that.
That
I
was the
remember
first
seeing her on
that I had
Graham
heard
Norton.
of. I was just going to say that was the first that I had heard of her, and I was amazed at that. What? She's doing what? To
I
her
know.
house?
I know. And I saw her, first time I saw this, I saw her on Graham Norton interviewed. And she was telling Graham Norton about inviting fans into her home. And I could see the horror on Graham Norton's face as he even contemplated inviting fans into your home. And all the other celebrities on the couch were all horrified. And she was like, no, you know what? My fans are great. We have great dance parties. We have so much fun. So that's the kind of artist she is, And she went out on her big Eras tour around the world, Ted.
Yeah.
And while she was doing that, she releases a motion picture about the tour while the tour's in motion. Like nobody would do that, right? You would think it would eat into ticket sales.
Yeah.
But of course, it fueled ticket sales. And she paid for the entire film herself. And not only that, she distributed the film around the world herself. There was no Hollywood studio in the middle. And those are just a few of the examples of Taylor Swift's rebellious streak. And I maintain that McCartney or Springsteen wouldn't even attempt any of those things.
No, and my understanding is that she is now doing a documentary on the making of the film / tour. So the tour may have ended, but it goes on in perpetuity.
Yeah, she's
brilliant.
changing the game. She's changing the recording industry, and may I say, she's doing it in a male-dominated industry.
Yeah, for sure. You know what I find amazing was how she went about to select these people who are going to be her special guests. She has a whole social media team, from what I understand, who follows. Her fans are following her, but her team is following her fans,
Yep.
writing about, let's say Mary in St. Louis is saying, oh, this is the fourth time that she's come into my vicinity. I wanted to buy tickets, still couldn't get tickets, or still can't afford tickets, or things are tough or whatever. And they make note of this person. Now comes this special event. Plucked out Mary. Mary, you're a special fan of Taylor's. She'd love for you to come to her album preview. And Mary, of course, is blown away. Doesn't even know what's going on. A bus shows up. All these people get in. They drive up the hill to this home. They don't know who it is. And she comes walking out with a tray of homemade brownies, for God's sake, or
right.
cookies. Wow.
As another writer said, which I quoted in the book, she scales the unscalable. In other words, she has this massive fan base, but she has this genius ability to do things like that occasionally that makes it feel so personal, even though she has millions of fans. So
I don't know why. I'm sorry. I don't know why as I read the book, I came upon the chapter of Roger Nielsen, and I thought, why am I seeing so many similarities between Roger Nielsen and Taylor Swift, other than the fact that she's going against the grain. And it was because every time you turn around, Roger Nielsen was doing something different with his life, oftentimes breaking rules that didn't exist, or forcing people to write up rules because they
That was one of my
exist.
favorite chapters, by the way, Ted, on Roger Nielsen, because it was a fun chapter. So what Roger Nielsen, a couple of things about Roger that your listeners might find interesting. So he was a famous NHL coach. He's passed away now, but he had this amazing ability to find loopholes in the rule book. That was his gift. And he was also a devout Christian, which is very interesting to me because he would go to church every Sunday. Even when he was on the road, he would, bring some of his players to church as well. But the interesting thing about that was he never swore.
Yeah.
And that's pretty rare for an NHL coach not to have any profanity, right? So they say like he'd be really angry at the ref and he'd go, "You stinker." Like, the worst it would be, And he did things like this. This is so funny. So he read the rule book like the good book, right? Yeah. His rule book, his NHL rule book was well thumbed and dog-eared. So, for example, when his team had a penalty shot awarded against his team, he would pull the goalie and put a defenseman on the ice. And when the other forward would pick up the puck at center ice and start skating in, the defenseman would rush him and check him. And in that season, when Roger was doing that, they had 6 penalty shots awarded against his team and not 1 goal. But eventually the league said, you can't do that anymore. You must have a goaltender on the ice. But that was typical of Roger, right? So then he said, okay, in the last 2 minutes of play when he was pulling the goaltender to put an extra attacker on the ice, he asked the goalie to leave his stick at the goal line, just lay it on the ice. So when the puck came down the ice, it would bounce off his stick because there was no rule against it until the NHL said, you can't do that anymore, Roger. So Roger was always innovating things like that, just finding little corners where he could get an advantage. And that chapter is just so funny. He was also an innovator. In other words, he was the first to use video in a big way to teach his team to watch the game on video after they'd played it, to look for weaknesses and strengths and weaknesses of the other team. He didn't care about shots on goal as a stat because he said a losing team could have more goals, more shots on goal. So what does that tell you? But he liked plus minus was his innovation, wanting to know how many minutes per game each player played. So he knew which guy on his bench had more gas in the tank. Like all of those stats that we now take for granted, and there's many of them, were all Roger. Mm-hmm. Roger was a scientist of the game. So he was a great Maverick case study in this book.
And many people might not, if you're a hockey fan, and especially if you're a Roger Nielsen fan, you might be surprised to know that he would have rather been a baseball coach rather than a hockey coach.
They say he was a baseball manager trapped in a hockey coach body. Yeah. He loved baseball because a manager can affect the outcome of a game much more than I think a hockey coach can.
Yeah.
If you just look at, pitching and strategy and et cetera. So he was definitely the other interesting thing about Roger, Ted, which has to be said, is that he had a big paper route from the time he was 8 years old till his early 30s.
This is unbelievable.
And when he gets his first big coaching job, first professional coaching job, it was down in Dallas, Texas, at a farm team down there that was owned by 2 professional NHL hockey teams. And he gets sent down there. And one of his first requests to the team is, I want video equipment, which at that time was very expensive. And they said, Roger, I don't know if we can get that for you. That's going to cost us like $800. And Roger said, hey, listen, I gave up my paper route for this job. We're looking at each other like, what? Yeah. But that was Roger, right? He was such a quirky.
He was making at that time a whack of money off that paper. He had 800 subscribers or something?
Yeah, 850 customers every morning. So we had a whole little group of his hockey playing kids help him deliver those papers every morning. And he made more money from the paper route than he did from teaching because he had his paper route, then he became a teacher, then he became a coach, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the great things about this book is suddenly names of people and organizations that you read about, and you start looking at it in a different way. Pinkerton's security guards. I can't look at the name Pinkerton's now and look at it and think about it the way I used to, thanks to a woman named Kate Warren.
Yeah. She
was female detective.
That's right. So when Pinkerton himself started his detective agency, which I think was the first detective agency in the United States, it was all men. And then one day Kate Warren walks into his office and says, I'm here to apply for a job. And he said, well, we don't have a secretarial position open. Mm-hmm. She said, no. I want to be a detective.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we don't have any female detectives. And she said, well, let me tell you why you should hire me. And she made this great case that because there are no female detectives, nobody would see her coming, that was her ace in the pocket, that she could get into situations as a woman that men couldn't get into. And she would look at a situation or a problem through female eyes, which is a very different set of analysis and strategic thinking than a man would.
Yeah.
So he, against all the wishes of his other detectives, Pinkerton hired her. He said, "I'm going to take a chance on you." And she ended up being one of his best detectives, he said, that he'd ever hired.
And in not a small way, responsible for saving the life of a U.S. president.
That's right. So they found out, they heard through the grapevine that there was a group of men who wanted to kill Abraham Lincoln before he was inaugurated. And they knew through their contacts, Pinkerton discovered that they were going to kill him at this railway station where he was coming up from Chicago, and then he would have to change trains in Baltimore and then go to Washington for the inauguration. They were going to kill him while he was changing trains in Baltimore. So they concoct this plan with Kate Warren. She gives him this incredible disguise to wear, because remember this, Abraham Lincoln's like 6'6" or something. He's hard to hide, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
So she gives him this really extensive disguise that looks like he's crippled. So a big overcoat, a hat, a cane. She tells him to double over, walk with a shuffle. She dons an outfit like she's a caregiver, like a nurse. She stays with him from Chicago all the way to Baltimore in the compartment with him. She's fully armed. She's the only detective guarding Abraham Lincoln. They get to Baltimore. She walks him right across this railway station. She can see the men that are there to kill him, and she walks right by them because the disguise works. They're looking for a tall guy with a tall stovepipe hat. They're looking at this crippled guy go by. They just don't pay him any attention. They get on the train to Washington, and she stays up all night while Abraham Lincoln sleeps, guarding him right to Washington so he can be inaugurated. So it was Kate Warren's idea and her guarding Abraham Lincoln that literally led to Abraham Lincoln being inaugurated as president.
Two things after I read that chapter stuck in my mind. Number one, Abe should have hired her full time. Maybe it would have ended differently.
Yes.
And number two, she would have been a fan of Taylor Swift and vice versa.
Yeah, because they were women in a man's world in a big, big way, especially Kate Warren. I mean, she was just surrounded by men. And there are other stories in that chapter about her infiltrating, wanted criminals. She would make friends with the criminals' wives. Yeah. Be able to get more information out of them in a way that men could never get near them. Anyway, she was very resourceful.
And something that I learned about the Pinkertons people, their logo was an eyeball.
Well, they say, yeah, that's right, because private eyes, they feel that saying came out of the fact that Kate Warren stayed up all night, kept her eye open all night. So that became the eye logo of Pinkerton, which was just "We never sleep" was really their slogan, Yeah. And that really came out of Kate Warren being up all night with the president.
Yeah. Another great chapter, how we all find out who the original meathead was.
Right.
It wasn't Archie's son-in-law. It was the guy who created Archie,
Norman Lear. I've always been a fan of Norman Lear. I just think his work in the 70s, when you think back, right, Ted? When you think about the state of sitcoms in the early 70s, it was what they call rural sitcoms, right? It was Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and Petticoat Junction were the top three sitcoms. And along comes Norman Lear with All in the Family, which is this radical sitcom based around a bigot who is racist. And what Norman's trying to do there is make us laugh at how absurd bigotry is. But I mean, think about, the kind of show he mounted, and then all the spinoffs, Maude, and then Good Times and the Jeffersons, like all those spinoffs were all groundbreaking. Maude was the first sitcom where they talked about abortion, and Good Times was the first sitcom that was built around a family in the black family in the projects of Chicago. And the Jeffersons, interestingly, the Black Panthers had a meeting with Norman Lear and said, you're always portraying black people as poor, and it's hurting our image. And so he said, okay, and he created the Jeffersons, which was about a millionaire black man. So anyway, he was a groundbreaking guy, Norman Lear. But what you have to know about him is he had to fight for every script in All in the Family's, being his first sitcom. Every script he had to fight against the network because they wanted him to take out all the edgy stuff, which of course was Archie Bunker. I mean, if you took that away, you wouldn't have Archie Bunker, right? But he had to fight every single script for all those years.
Yeah.
Not just one or two, like every single script. And as a matter of fact, Carol O'Connor, who portrayed Archie Bunker, struggled also the whole time because he struggled with having to say all those words.
Yeah.
Carol O'Connor was actually an Irish intellectual having to take on the personification of a beer drinking bigot, and he struggled with it. Sometimes he would even refuse to say it, or there was a moment where he cried. He was so uneasy with what the character was.
It dawned on me at one point as I'm reading this, and here's another incident of Lear pushing against the network, saying, "No, if you don't do this, I'm out. Show's over. I'm walking. And I'm thinking to myself, we've all kind of wanted to do that at one time to the power ahead, above us. But it comes a point where after a while they're going to say, okay, you know what? I don't care. That's enough. And I thought, did he ever think that maybe they wouldn't take it and maybe they would say, go ahead, walk?
You know what? He was willing to walk. He really was. Rob Reiner had that great line that, fighting the network was easy for Norman because he had flown something like 40 missions over Germany during World War II. Like when you compare those two, network is nothing, right? But I really think he was willing to walk away at any point. And I think the network was afraid of that because they had a hit on their hands and they knew without Norman it would just collapse. And I think that was Norman's ace in his pocket and remember this too, I think he was nearly 50 years old before All in the Family hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wasn't a young guy who was getting his first big crack at the big time. Like he'd already had a whole lifetime. So I think he was more than willing to walk away as a 50-year-old.
So you think to yourself, where does the idea of a character such as Archie Bunker come from? And in his case, it was his dad.
His dad and him had a very tough relationship. Two things that came out of his growing up that showed up in All in the Family was, of course, as you mentioned, Meathead. So Norman Lear's dad would always call Norman Meathead as a kid. Yeah. And whenever Norman's dad was fighting with his mom, he would always tell his mom to stifle it. And if you remember the show, Archie was always saying that to Edith, right? Stifle it, Edith. So a lot of that came out of Norman's upbringing.
But you could really sense the racism in his father when he used to refer to Norman as the stupidest white kid I know. Yeah. What is that? Good Lord, man.
Yeah, to hear that from your father, yeah, that's a lot to take.
Now, at the time, because I remember reading some elsewhere about Lear and about Bill Paley, who ran CBS at the time, who aired All in the Family. Paley was not a fan of All in the Family. It was a mid-season replacement or a summer replacement, I believe. Yeah. But his wife was.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories, Ted, that I come across where the wife of a powerful man saves the thing.
Yeah.
It's not the first time I've come across that where a wife says, you know what, you should give that a second look. Or I think you've got something there. Even, we talked about Sydney's show, We Regret to Inform You. And when you and I and her were talking about that show on your show,
yep.
We were talking with Stephen King, how he had a manuscript for a book and he had 34, I think it was, rejections. He throws it in the garbage can. He gives up. His wife fishes it out of the garbage can and says, I think you've got something here. Keep going. And it was the next one, the 35th publisher that said yes. And that was Carrie. And none of that would have happened if Stephen King's wife hadn't pulled it. Like there's lots of stories of having a champion in the family.
And at one point, if I recall correctly what I had read, Paley had decided to do a research project on how audiences were reacting, whether this was in fact fueling racism or whether it was bringing the ugliness and stupidity of racism to the forefront, where people could realize this is wrong, this is stupid, and yet it found in fact it was to a certain degree at least fueling racism. But he took that research and crumpled it and threw it in the garbage.
Yeah. It was interesting, when they were doing focus groups on Archie on All in the Family in the very early days, even maybe before it aired on TV. They asked people that, that typical thing where press a button when you like something and press a button when you don't like something. So people watch the show. They were laughing their heads off at Archie Bunker, but afraid to press the like button because it would suggest that you like the racism or the bigotry,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it was a tough thing for Norman to get a great reaction, a true reaction.
I love that when you see stand-up comedians who sort of jolt audiences in their seats, and they'll say something, and people their immediate instinct is to laugh, and then they pause because they think, "Oh, I shouldn't be laughing." Too late. You already laughed. Your gut reaction is your real reaction. You laughed. You thought it was funny. You can't
There's
go back.
nothing more true than comedy. There's nothing more true than comedy because laughing is almost like an involuntary thing. It's even I've always often wondered, Ted, where how can a critic go to a movie theater, watch a movie where the audience is laughing uproariously for 2 hours, then write a bad review of the movie?
Yeah, that's why comedians have problems having sex because only one of them can be faked, and it's not laughter.
Right.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
I've had the great fortune to say that I've been associated with one of Toronto's finest names in men's clothing for more than 25 years. Tom's Place. Founded by Tom Mahalick's father in 1958, Tom's Place offers brand name men's apparel at unbeatable prices. But more than that, they boast a long-serving, knowledgeable, and friendly staff that can assist you whether you're looking for casual or formal attire. And they have plenty of first-class tailors on site. In addition, Tom and his family are well known for their philanthropic work. So if you're looking to deal with great people who can fulfill your clothing desires at outstanding prices, do yourself a favor and visit Tom's Place. They're open weekdays from 11 to 6, Saturdays 10 to 5, and Sundays noon to 5. You'll find Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Or check them out online at toms-place.com. Tom's Place will suit you.
Now back to Ted Woloshyn.
But you mentioned the television programs that were on at the time: Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and I'm sorry,
Petticoat Junction.
Petticoat Junction. You know what all three of those shows had in common?
Doug Henning,
Sam Drucker, who played
Sam Drucker, right?
Because they're all tied together. Those shows.
Yeah. Doug Henning, I think, produced all of those shows. He was kind of like the Norman Lear of rural sitcoms. But you're right, Sam Drucker ran the store in Petticoat Junction. Am I right? And then he showed up in Green Acres, and then he was some kind of friend of the Clampetts, right?
Yeah, because the Clampetts used to come visit, and the other thread in there is Bea Benaderet, the actress,
Right.
because she ran the Petticoat Junction.
Right.
She was Granny's cousin or whatever on Green Acres, and because she was in Petticoat Junction, she therefore showed up occasionally on Green Acres. And I didn't realize it because I just started watching recently, but she was also the neighbor on the Burns and Allen show.
Wow.
She had a hell of a career. When you look at her, at her, and you think, wow, that's a lot of great shows.
And a voiceover career too, right? Did she do one of the voices on the Flintstones? Did she do Betty?
She was Betty Rubble. When you listen to her, if you get a chance to watch the old shows, the old Burns and Allen shows, when she laughs, you think, my God, it's Betty.
Betty, yeah, exactly. Yeah. What a great career she had.
Yeah, just a brilliant career. And there's so many actors like that where you think, why do I know that guy? And if you look at their resume, you think, wow, okay, yeah, I remember him on this show. I remember seeing him on this show. It's just some of these guys, they were never stars, but they were always working. And they were always working on great shows.
I know, that's so true. And back then you could have a real great career bouncing show to show, right? Yeah. In a way that's a little harder to do these days. Because I worked with, by the way, speaking of the Flintstones, I worked with the actor who played Mr. Slate on the Flintstones, Stevenson. He was a great actor. I hired him many times because he was a great voiceover actor. And he told me this great story, Ted, where if you remember Mel Blanc, who did Barney, and I think he did Dino too on the Flintstones.
Who didn't he do?
I know. It's one of the most talented people of all time. He got into a horrific car accident in the 60s where it was so horrific that he ended up in a full body cast in the hospital for maybe a year.
Wow.
And but the Flintstones had to keep moving. So Stevenson was telling me, John Stevenson, that they would gather in Mel Blanc's hospital room and then later his bedroom when he was moved to home. They would surround his bed, with the scripts. He would have a script too. I guess they put it up somewhere that he could read it. Put microphones all around the bed, and many of the episodes were recorded that way.
Wow.
Because Mel Blanc was immobile in a full body cast.
Now today, of course, that would be no problem with Zoom, Riverside, all the technology that exists. But that back in the 60s, 70s, or whatever, that was quite amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I've saved the last person. We'll talk about some of the other people, but the last person that I want to talk about is, I think, is probably a personal favorite of yours, and that would be Bill Bernbach. Because he was an advertising guy, like you were an advertising guy. And you worked for him, or we worked for his company.
I worked for his agency. He died before I got to work for that agency. But yeah, he is my advertising hero. There's no doubt about that. And the reason I've always admired Bill Bernbach so much was he revolutionized the advertising business. So in 1959, his agency in New York called Doyle Dane Bernbach landed the Volkswagen account.
Yeah.
And you have to have some context there. So there was no humor in advertising. The first half of the 20th century, it was very sober. See the USA in your Chevrolet would be the extent of it. And he brought humor to advertising for the first time. So if you think of all those brilliant VW print ads and TV spots from the 60s that were so funny, so self-deprecating, that was all Bill Bernbach. And they call that the golden era of advertising, because other agencies looked at that work and thought, oh my God, you can actually have a sense of humor and have some emotion in advertising, not just straight facts. So he revolutionized the business for all time. And he's the guy, he's the altar we all bow at in advertising. We all still want to be like him.
I can understand why. And when you talk about Volkswagen, back then you say everybody was pushing, it was big cars, metal cars, gas guzzlers, all coming out of Detroit. And now here's this little car, this Volkswagen. He gets the account and turns it into a humorous piece. It's a German company, not known really for their sense of humor, all due respect.
Post World War II, where Germans were really not the most favorite people in the world. And he took this,
and he was a Jew,
and predominantly Jewish agency. Yes. So there was that dynamic going on. Also, what was interesting about Volkswagen was he took what you would call the bugs. And that's not a Volkswagen bug, but the lesser things about the Volkswagen and made them features. So, for example, he would say, he was always super honest about the Volkswagen. He'd say it's underpowered, but it only sips gas. Or he'd say it seats 2 adults comfortably and 4 uncomfortably.
Yes, I love that line.
Right?
Yeah. And then when they took the lunar landing from the thing that landed
on the moon in '69,
on the moon, and stuck. Explain that, because you'll do a better job.
If you remember back when the Apollo 11 landed on the moon, the lunar landing module was this very odd looking thing. It had 4 legs, and it almost looked like a giant insect, if you know what I mean. It was very odd looking. And the day after the moon landing, Bill Bernbach's agency ran a full-page ad in newspapers across the country, full page. All it showed was that really terrible lunar landing module, and the headline simply said, "It's ugly, but it gets you there." With the VW logo. That's all it said. And again, it was so self-deprecating, saying, we know that our car is ugly, but it works.
And they never had a motto, as you mentioned, see the world, Chevrolet. I mean, everybody had a
slogan.
A slogan.
Very on in our business not to have a slogan. Yep.
Yeah, and so there's there's so many great stories, and how he, he was he worked in the mailroom. He was a kid in the mailroom and came up with an idea, pitch the idea sort of behind everybody's back. And well, again, you tell the story.
He was in the mailroom at this other agency in New York. He thought he could do better advertising, even though he was in the mailroom. So he writes an ad for a liquor that this agency has. They run it, and it's very successful. And he goes to the agency and asks for a raise, and they don't really want to give it to him. But he eventually makes his way. He has a spark for advertising. It's clear. He makes his way and becomes the creative director of an agency called Gray Advertising. Mm-hmm. And he senses that the agency is more interested in money than good marketing. So he writes a letter to the president saying, I'm worried our agency is going in the wrong direction. And I think we should really talk about creativity here and worship creativity and treat the consumer like a smart individual rather than the mentality of a 12-year-old. And they don't even respond to him, Ted. They don't respond at all.
Of course.
So he leaves the agency, takes a couple of people with him, and starts Doyle Dane Bernbach, the agency that revolutionized the business. So he, even going back to his mailroom days, he was going against the grain. Like everything about him was not in keeping with the advertising zeitgeist at the time.
Two other clients that stick out in the chapter: Avis, the rent-a-car people.
Yeah, so they were struggling because Hertz was the big rent-a-car company. Hertz was like a mile past all other car rental companies. And the president of Avis came to Bill and said, I need some great advertising because I need to save this company. And you have to love Bill Bernbach. He said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to run everything we write. You're not going to change a word, and you're going to run it where we tell you to run it. And if you don't, and I don't want any interference from any of your managers. And if you don't want to agree to those rules, I don't want your business. I can't even imagine today, Ted, anybody saying that to a potential client, being that bold. But this Avis president has got nothing to lose because his ship's going down. So he agrees to that. And Bill Bernbach comes back with this radical idea of saying we're only number 2, but we try harder.
Yeah.
Now you have to put that in context too. No advertiser in the history of advertising up until that point had ever boasted about being number 2 in the marketplace. You would never say that out loud. Even if you were number 2, you would assume you're number 1. You would never say we're second place. But by doing that, he made people feel like Avis was the underdog, and people love an underdog, right? And even saying we're number 2, but we try harder, sent a message to all the Avis employees that they had to try harder. And they did.
Yeah.
And Avis started to steal market share from Hertz like crazy as a result of that radical campaign.
But it wasn't accepted in the focus groups, in the research, by only half the people thought it was a good idea, and the other half thought it was a terrible idea.
That's
and
right.
Nobody's going to venture money on a 50-50 chance.
That's so true. 50% of the focus groups hated the idea. And Bill, again, you got to love him. He said, you know what? I don't care. He said, if I'm only after the 50% who love the idea. So that's, and he was right. I mean, if 50% of the audience is with you, that's a big chunk of an audience.
Yep.
Still, even though the numbers sound scary.
And then there's the one ad that I started picturing in my mind as you were describing it in the book, in this chapter, about a department store that was literally on Macy's was the giant. Nobody knew about this other place.
Yeah.
But suddenly they did because of this one ad that they took out, that we even quoted that it was mentioned in the television series Mad Men.
Yeah, that's right. It was for Orbach's department store, which was, as you said, a very small, unremarkable store in the shadow of Macy's. And that was really the first campaign DDB did before they landed Volkswagen. They wrote these very funny, self-deprecating, smart ads for Orbach's, and suddenly wealthy people were going to Orbach's where they would have never normally ever stepped foot in that store. So he really was, from the get-go, a brilliant ad man.
So he takes out an ad, a full page in the New York Times. Big money at that time. Not as much these days, obviously. Yeah. But doesn't utilize the whole page, which is unheard of.
Yeah, he was he loved white space. He wasn't afraid of it. Even the very first Volkswagen print ad, if you remember this, as you were saying, Detroit was all big cars and tail fins and chrome.
Yep.
And the Volkswagen was none of that. It was his first ad. The headline was "Think Small," because "Think Big" was the zeitgeist at the time. Think small, and in this whole print ad, if you can imagine, he had the Volkswagen up in the corner, really small. It was all white space, and then "Think Small," like it was just,
Yep.
a radical use. Even in Mad Men, they referenced that ad too in Mad Men, and Don Draper looks at it. He goes, "What are they doing?" He goes, 50% of the ad they're not even using. Like he couldn't even get his head around it in the show.
Yeah. So the ad for Ogilvy's is it's a black page. It's a curtain, a black curtain,
Orbach.
right?
Yeah.
Or Orbach, sorry, yeah. It's a black curtain, and the wording.
I got to remember what the wording is now. I know the ad. I just can't remember.
It's
the
something
headline.
like it's too bad you can't see us wearing this, or we can't
I
see
think
you
it was
wearing
lingerie or something.
Yeah. It's too bad we can't.
Too bad we can't show it to you. Yeah, I mean, imagine not showing the product. Let's go right in there.
No,
right?
no.
In an ad. Like how often I can tell you in my experience. I mean, not showing the product in an ad, that would take a lot of salesmanship in the boardroom. Let me tell you.
I think even today, reading about, and this was back years ago, 50s, 60s, and what he was pulling off then, I think today to try to pull that off, even though we've gone through all that, still the vast majority of people who run agencies would look at you and say, "There's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out."
The second print ad he did for Volkswagen, the headline was lemon. That's the most toxic word you can use in a car.
Yes.
I could not sell that headline today, Ted. There's no way. Yet Bill somehow was able to do it back then.
I'm just going to wrap with this one. I said I was going to finish on this, but I want to finish on your first chapter, how you came about, how you decide the order of these 18 people, because you're not really building toward a climax necessarily, but Billy Jack is chapter 1 in the book. Now, Billy Jack, for a lot of people who are listening right now going, who the hell are you talking about?
Well, I probably did that because I love that movie so much. So that movie I saw as a kid when I think I would be about 12 or 13 maybe.
Yeah.
It was 1971. And me and my buddies went to we'd go to the movies every week, and we just decided to go to this movie called Billy Jack. And it was an epiphany to me because I'd never seen martial arts in a movie before. Because this predates Bruce Lee and all the whole kung fu craze.
Yep.
That happened a little later in the 70s. And I was fascinated. I mean, I was fascinated by the martial arts in that film. And then I ended up studying martial arts for many, many, many years. So it really affected me personally. But that movie, which hasn't aged well, it's badly acted and has a pretty very 60s heavy hippie feel to it. That movie changed Hollywood, which I didn't know as a kid. And I didn't know for many, many years that it had any kind of influence on Hollywood. But Tom Laughlin, who played Billy Jack, was also the writer and director of Billy Jack. He did a lot of things to market that movie that had never been done before. And he ended up fighting with studios over the movie and suing them and trying to get control. But what he basically did was he marketed movies in a way that had never been done before. He did focus groups, which, believe it or not, Hollywood never really did. The biggest thing was he did television commercials for his movie. And back then there was no television commercials for movies.
That I find amazing.
All there was, if you remember, Ted, was movie trailers in the movie theaters. And then, if you remember, newspapers had big movie sections, right, that had every theater in town and said what they were showing. That was the extent of movie marketing. He wanted to do television advertising, which he ended up doing, and billboard advertising, which studios never did for movies. And he was a genius at that. And he ended up making that Little Billy Jack film, at that time, the highest grossing independent film of all time. And it was actually one of the highest grossing films of the year in 1971, and then re-released again in 73. They say that his marketing thinking, Ted, led to Jaws becoming a huge blockbuster, because that was just a few years later, and it was television that really drove the audiences into the theater to see
Yep.
Jaws. And then The Exorcist in '76, that was really, again, a television that was all due to Tom Laughlin. Nobody was doing that kind of marketing of movies back in that day. Tom Laughlin was. So he was a movie rebel. He sued studios. No director back then would sue a studio because it wouldn't work again, right? He did. He sued studios when they were not marketing his films properly. So he literally sued them, got control, did marketing his own way, and changed the way Hollywood functions to this day.
And did he not release the film twice?
He did. So in '71, I think it was maybe Warner Brothers, if I'm not mistaken, released the movie, but put no marketing behind it, even though they had promised him they were going to market it well. He even went to the premiere of it in Cleveland, I think it was, expecting searchlights and press, and there was nothing there when he got there. There was not even posters in the windows of the movie theater. The poor guy that owned the movie theater took butcher paper and scribbled the name of the movie on the butcher paper. That was all there was. And Tom Laughlin was incensed that they were literally trying to kill his movie. So that's where he started suing them and fighting with them. Then eventually in '73, he re-releases the movie into movie theaters. But here's what he does. He does this thing called forewalling. So he rents the movie theaters and puts his movie in the movie theater. So the movie theater gets the concession sales from, popcorn and all that, and they get the movie rental money. But he keeps the ticket sales because he's renting the theater. So he rented theaters all across North America. He put the movie in the theater so he could keep the movie in the theaters as long as he wanted. That was the key thing.
Right.
Because he was controlling the theater by renting it, he could keep the movie in the theater. So he let his marketing kick in while the movie was still in the theaters. And that was really the secret sauce. Because normally, if he didn't control the theater, the movie studio would have just run it for 2 weeks and then on to the next movie, and the advertising wouldn't have kicked in yet. So that was really his genius of renting theaters.
There's another guy, like as we mentioned off the top, Taylor Swift, who just took control of her own destiny, of his own destiny in this case, right?
Yeah, very similar, the two of them, in very different eras.
Yeah, exactly. That's only 5 or 6 people that we've talked about. There's another dozen in the book, all compelling stories and fascinating. Is there a sequel to this book? And were there more than 18 people originally that you looked at?
I could easily do a volume 2, Ted. There were lots of interesting people. I just chose stories that I loved immediately, but there were lots of stories. Even, I was thinking Jacques Plante is a great example of being a radical pioneer with him and the Mask, and how he was called a coward, and the NHL forbid it, and Toe Blake, his coach, forbid it, and he just said, I'm not going back out there unless I can work. Like he's a typical guy that could have been in this book.
Yeah. And you imagine back then being called a coward as an athlete, that would be the worst insult that could be hurled at you.
Yeah, the worst thing you could say to an athlete. Yeah, and he didn't care.
I hope there is a volume 2 and maybe more after that, because it's just a terrific read.
I'll say what the 2 things about the book, Ted. It's really inspiring, the stories. Not my writing, not my writing, but they're the stories of these is really, really inspiring. If you're in a position in your life right now where you're not sure if you can keep going, read this book. And I'll say this, that I feel that the one takeaway from this book is, if you don't think one person can change the world, you're wrong.
Yeah. Or at least they're part of the world.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a great book. It is book number 6 for Terry O'Reilly, Against the Grain, available wherever you find fine books, as they say. Yes. And the rest of all your broadcasting with you and your daughter, everything is still going full tilt.
It is. I'm writing and recording new shows because we hit the air with Under the Influence in January. So I'm in the middle of writing and producing a bunch of shows to get ready for the launch of our 21st season.
I'm happy, and so are hundreds of thousands of others who listen intently and read intently your book. Terry, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. I thank you for taking
Likewise,
the
Steve.
time, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. That's going to do it for another week. Thank you all. Thank you to Paul Gadd, our executive producer. The music comes to you from Bike Thieves. And don't forget, check out our website, tedwallishin.ca, and you can listen back on former episodes, past episodes, and leave your comments and your thoughts. And while you're on the line, don't forget to fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You can change or even save a life. In the meantime, have a great week.